about all the other champions in that division? You got Scott Quigg, Carl Frampton, Guillermo Rigondeaux.
I'm gonna get the opportunity, boy. You working your ass off, don't you?
Hey, that's what we do. That's what we do.
Dante's Boxing Nation. I see it, baby. Y'all the man.
That's what it is.
I love it. I love what you're doing for boxing.
Thank you, man.
Don't stop. Keep on going strong. Keep on going hard. A lot of big fights coming this year. A lot of big fights.
Hi, this is Tokyo, and you're watching Dante's Boxing Nation.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? For those of you guys that are subscribed to my channel, you already know that I've made numerous videos about Gennady Golovkin versus Andre Ward, numerous videos about Gennady Golovkin versus Sergio Martinez, etc., etc., right? But in a lot of the videos that I made about Triple G versus Ward, for the diehard Golovkin fans that don't want Golovkin to fight against Andre Ward, and they always say silly stuff like, why don't you leave Golovkin alone and move up and go fight Sergey Kovalev? To counter that, I've always said, well, if that's the case, wouldn't it make more sense that Ward fight Golovkin first, since Golovkin is a much bigger star than Sergey Kovalev? Since people keep saying, I keep hearing Golovkin fans say stuff like, without Golovkin, the sport is dead, you know, completely ignoring fighters on a coincidental list like Keith Thurman, Errol Spence, Terrence Crawford, who do pretty well. Matter of fact, Keith Thurman, last time I checked, Keith Thurman did 4 million views on free TV when he fought against the Ghost Guerrero, and Broner versus Porter did 2.4 million views, doubling the views that Gennady Golovkin has done in any fight. Granted, it was on HBO, but that once again proves my point that free TV is better than paid subscription TV because more people will watch. So getting back to my original point, what I was basically saying is, if you believe that the sport needs Golovkin that much, then doesn't it make more sense that Ward fight that guy that the sport needs before he fights Sergey Kovalev? And the reports that I read today completely suggest that that makes sense. According to Dan Rafael, that is exactly what Andre Ward is planning on doing. Fighting the biggest star, Gennady Golovkin, first, and then going after Sergey Kovalev. Once again, man, I want you guys to understand something. When you truly believe that you are the best, this is what you do. You go after the biggest and the toughest opponents available. We all know that it gets no bigger and tougher than Golovkin and Kovalev, right? Not only that, but according to this report by Dan Rafael, Andre Ward is even willing to meet Golovkin's demands at a catchweight. I don't know if it's going to be at 164, 166, I don't know. But according to the reports, Andre Ward is willing to meet Golovkin at a catchweight. Something that, once again, Golovkin didn't need or want when it came to fighting against a much bigger Chavez, who can never make weight at 168. He was willing to fight him at 168. He was willing to fight Carl Froch at 168. Some guy sent me a message saying how Froch is so much bigger and tougher and stronger than Andre Ward. So once again, you're making Golovkin look worse when you say that, because the question is always there. Why does he need a catch weight for one? Why does he need a catch weight when it comes to Andre Ward in particular, but not bigger fighters? It would have made a lot more sense, and I'm sure you guys would agree with me, if Golovkin would have just said, you know what? If I move up to 168, whoever I fight is going to have to be at a catch weight until I get acclimated to the weight, right? But he didn't say that. He was willing to jump right in to the 168-pound division depending on the opponent. If he believed that he could beat the opponent, it's at 168. If he questioned him beating the opponent, then it's at a catch weight. And that's what we got. And then you have these decafs acting like all of a sudden they care more about the business side of boxing as opposed to the actual best fighting the best, saying that, oh, Golovkin is doing this because he's the A side. What does asking a guy to come down to 164 have to do with A side? What does that have to do with being A side? I could understand you saying he wants more money because he's the A side. Tom Loeffler has already said that they are willing to do a 50-50 split. No one is even complaining about the money. What does fighting at a catchweight have to do with A side or B side? You're telling me that you could tell someone, you're going to have to tie one of your arms behind your back if you want to fight me because I'm the A side. That's pretty much what you're saying. It doesn't make any sense. You want a head start in the race because you're the A side or you believe that you're the A side. But you don't need a head start if you're going to race Chavez or Froch or anyone else. Come on, man. We know what time it is. We all get into conversations, deep boxing conversations on the streets. And when it comes to me, what I notice is no matter what side of the fence a boxing fan is on, he could be extremely biased, he could be extremely casual, or he could be a very knowledgeable fan. But one thing all of those fans have in common is they always tell me the exact same thing. There's only one guy that can beat Gennady Golovkin, and that's Andre Ward. Now, of course, there may be other fighters that can beat that can beat Golovkin, but when it comes to Andre Ward, regardless if this boxing fan hates every single fighter on the coincidental list, he will tell you in your face that Andre Ward will most likely beat Gennady Golovkin. So when you hear fans say stuff like Andre Ward is boring, nobody wants to watch that fight, etc., those are code words. They are really telling you that Andre Ward is the only guy that I'm worried about. Andre Ward is better than Gennady Golovkin. I don't want the same thing that happened to Donaire, that happened to Manny Pacquiao, happen to Gennady Golovkin. This is what they are really telling you. And as far as some of you fans, once again, trying to create distractions, when you're really supposed to be boxing fans and you're really supposed to want to watch the best fighters fight the best, like we watch in all other sports. We see the best teams play against the best teams when they make it to the playoffs, and then they go to the Super Bowl or the finals or the gold medal match in the Olympics, right? This is how it's supposed to be. You don't hear teams in the Olympics say, I don't want to go to the gold medal match because that guy that they want me to fight, he's not as popular as me, and so on and so forth. And I bring more fans to the arena than he does. It doesn't make sense. And I'm going to direct this question to the fans of Triple G as opposed to Triple G himself, because they're the ones that make the millions of excuses. So I ask you this question. Are you honestly going to sit here and tell me you would rather your fighter not fight for the gold medal to prove that he's the best just because you're afraid that he's going to lose? I mean, where is your confidence in your favorite fighter? Once again, I'm talking to the diehard Golovkin fans. And even though talking about who's watched more and all that kind of stuff is completely irrelevant, because if it was relevant, Golovkin would have never fought Willie Monroe. He would have never fought Adama. And I don't even remember Adama's full name. That tells you how unknown of a fighter he is. That's why I always say Adama only, right? If this was about how many people come to watch you, Golovkin would have never fought those type of opponents. all right? But just for conversation's sake, let's talk about TV ratings for just a second. Now, if you do a Google search and you look up Andre Ward's TV ratings against Edwin Rodriguez, against Chad Dawson, you will find out that he did better TV ratings than Golovkin did that year. Now, Ward's last fight against Paul Smith, we can't even really use those numbers as an example because he was going up against arguably the second biggest fight of the year that was on primetime free TV, Broner versus Porter, right? So on top of Andre Ward going up against a big card that's on primetime TV NBC, not Spike, not ESPN, this was primetime NBC. Not only was Andre Ward going up against that, you also have to consider the fact that for Andre Ward, that was just a tune-up bout that he was supposed to win. Okay? It wasn't a super six type of fight. It wasn't, against Golovkin. It was a tune-up type of fight he was supposed to win. Broner versus Porter was a 50-50 fight that a lot of people never even thought would take place. Okay? It was a big damn deal. And Andre Ward was fighting on BET, a channel that had never aired any boxing before that. Okay? For those of you guys who don't know, it's not really that much of a surprise that whenever two cards air on the same night, the numbers are usually split. And if one card is on prime time and the other card is not on prime time, then the split is going to be a lot more lopsided, like it was in this case right here. When it comes to all this TV ratings and who's watched, who's boring, and so on and so forth, this situation reminds me of Donaire versus Rigondeaux, because this is exactly what fans were saying about Guillermo Rigo. What a coincidence, right? To this day, you still have fans saying, Rigo is boring and so on. But, when I say fans, I'm only talking about the decafs. I'm not talking about real boxing fans. But, you have these decafs saying that Rigo is boring and this and that. Even after he just had 2 knockouts back to back. That's how you know that an ignorant fan like that is pandering to a false logic just to justify his emotions. That's all that type of person is trying to do. Sit over here saying Rigo is boring, he's boring. But get this though. Now, you would have told me before that Donaire versus Rigondeaux fight, just like people were saying now, oh, no one's going to watch it and all this kind of stuff, which is ridiculous. Because if everyone is watching Golovkin fight against Willie Monroe, someone that nobody even knew, why would people not watch Golovkin fight pound for pound number 2, the best fighter in the world? It doesn't make sense. But going back to Donaire versus Rigo, would it surprise you if I tell you guys that Donaire did his best ratings against Guillermo Rigondeaux? I mean, all the other opponents that Donaire got in the ring with, and he does his best ratings against the quote-unquote most boring fighter, Rigondeaux. How does that make any sense, guys? Not only that, but why is it this is the only fight of Donaire's that HBO decided to do a mini 24/7 type of series to promote the fight? It's because HBO knew that this was Donaire's biggest fight. They knew that this was going to be bigger than anything that Donaire had did previously. And the same thing goes for Golovkin versus Ward. How many of you fans want to try to tell me right now that Golovkin versus Ward will not do bigger numbers than Golovkin versus Monroe or anybody else that Golovkin has fought previously? So if you tell me otherwise, you would be a damn lie. Okay? So for you people in the comment section saying stuff like, oh, but if Golovkin fights Ward, the numbers won't add up and it won't be a pay-per-view, and it doesn't even matter if it's a pay-per-view. First of all, it doesn't really need to be a pay-per-view. I mean, once again, we've seen Broner fight Porter. It wasn't pay-per-view, and they did 2.4 million views. This fight doesn't need to be on pay-per-view. It needs to be on HBO. And once again, the fact that some of you guys are even talking about pay-per-view, you even bringing up pay-per-view, it suggests that you know deep down that Andre Ward is really much bigger than anyone that Golovkin has ever faced, because you wouldn't even be talking about pay-per-view. Okay? But we all know that Triple G has never fought on pay-per-view, and Andre Ward has never fought on pay-per-view. So it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that Golovkin will do better numbers if he fights Andre Ward. And Ward will do better numbers if he fights Golovkin. So if you think about it that way, they are helping each other. But the most important thing is we are getting to watch the best fight the best. Okay? You know, the more I think about the double standards, the more I realize we cannot take these decafs too damn serious. Because the decafs are the same people who were saying before Floyd Mayweather, all he cares about is his undefeated record. He just fights guys that he knows that he can beat, right? And so on and so forth. That's all he cares about is his record and protecting that. He's always talking about, he needs to be the A side and all this stuff. Who cares about all of that? This is what the decaf was saying before, right? Now when it comes to Gennady Golovkin, they are the ones that are coming out and using that stuff for their fighter, Gennady Golovkin. Now they care about, now it is important for him to keep his undefeated record, right? When it comes to Golovkin, when it comes to the fans, their biggest concern is Golovkin keeping that undefeated record. These fans, they want Golovkin to go in there with guys that he knows that he can beat. They don't want him to go in there with a guy that he could possibly lose against. You don't believe me? I mean, let's just take Dan Rafael, for example. We all know that Dan Rafael is a big fan of Golovkin and not too much of a fan of fighters on the coincidental list, right? Now, I remember when Golovkin was fighting against Willie Monroe at the weigh-in, and it was my friend Fred from Barbershop Conversations. He basically asked Dan Rafael in the interview the question. He says, does Willie Monroe have any chance of winning this fight? And Dan Rafael, he put this expression on his face like, come on, man, are you serious? He put that look on his face like, of course he has no chance, right? And basically, I forget exactly what he said, but paraphrasing, he pretty much said, no, he doesn't really have a chance. And he said, he doesn't really have that many knockouts, so on and so forth, right? So the point that I'm making is, once again, people like Dan Rafael knew that Golovkin was fighting against a guy who had no chance at all, and nobody had a problem with it. But when it comes to him fighting against Andre Ward, that's the guy that you don't want him to fight? Does that make any sense, guys? It doesn't make any sense at all. All it proves is you prefer this 33-year-old man to continue fighting opponents that he knows that he can beat, that you fans know or believe that he can beat, right? As long as he keeps that undefeated record. Because you fans that jumped on the Golovkin wagon are the same fans that was saying these same things about Donaire before he lost to Guillermo Rigondeaux, right? You were saying the same things about Donaire. And you guys already seen what happened to Donaire's career after he lost to Rigo. And you don't want the same thing to happen to Gennady Golovkin. But I got some bad news for you. Golovkin might end up fighting against Andre Ward. Because from the looks of things, Andre Ward is calling Tom Loeffler and Gennady Golovkin's bluff right now. Andre Ward is willing to do whatever it takes to get this fight against Golovkin. So let's see what happens. Let's see if Tom Loeffler and Gennady Golovkin, if they keep their word. 164, 50-50 split. I'm on to the next one.